Aloha, folks, and thanks for coming back in and joining us. I'm here with two well-established community leaders from different generations, and we're here today to talk about kind of an interesting topic. And this topic, I have to kind of start by saying it involves saying that some of the things that you were hearing before are a lie. A polite lie, but a bit of a lie. And that lie is that there is this thing that we can call the community. And that, you can come in and that it is one thing and you can, email the community or text, it's not like that. So we're going to go around and introduce ourselves today, and we're going to give you some information about our experience with community issues intersecting with energy, and hopefully some ideas on how to make things better. So I'm really pleased to have Stacey Alapai and Henry Curtis with me today. And again, I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves. I'm going to start and hopefully try and set a good example on that. My name is Doug McLeod, and as far as like my life experience in these community issues, these things really started to become a concern for me in two roles. One, when I was working for local government here, doing energy issues for the county. But also, I spent a number of years as the vice president of Maui Tomorrow, an environmental group here on Maui. And, one of the things that became apparent here on Maui is that we have this process where developers would come to the island, and they'd come and show you a diagram or talk to you about an idea, and they'd say, who do we need to talk to about this? How do we get this approved? And you quickly realize that there's a problem here because, the folks coming to the island, they are transactional. They are seeking something. And the folks that ended up that they were talking to are just often coming from very different backgrounds. So just a couple of specific things that came up for me in the past. Number one, we found on Maui is that projects outside of rural areas become incredibly difficult to define the affected community. So think for a minute about visual impact issues, okay? Kahuku is probably the poster child for this in Hawaii. But here on Maui, the issues that we'd run into would be, if let's say your commute takes you by a wind turbine every day, does that give you a vote or an opinion equal to someone who lives, where they see this every day? And, how big a circle do you draw around something? Do we go out 5 miles for a giant wind turbine? And how do you define that community? And it became apparent that it's just a very difficult issue to try and understand because everyone's coming at it from these different directions. So that's, when I started really worrying it is very difficult to define who's the affected community and who you'd even talk to. So I'm going to stop with that just as my introduction, but that's what has gotten me thinking about these issues, and let me turn it over to Stacey now.
Aloha, my name is Stacey Alapai. I was not expecting to be on this stage today. A year ago, I would not have understood half of the conversations that happened here today. I attended a community event after last year's conference that we're actually having again tomorrow night, and that sort of opened this whole industry of energy up to me. And before that, I had not really thought about electricity besides monthly when I pay my bill and anytime the power went out. And around that same time last year, my bill had more than doubled in price, and I called Hawaiian Electric, and the very, very polite lady who has the bill pay number on the back did not know how to help me. And so then I just started asking questions, and if you've known me for a little while or follow me on social media, you know that once I have a question, I'm going to find the answer. And then I learned that something called the PUC exists, and that something called Hawaii Energy exists, and that has led, long story long, to me co-founding an ETIP project called the Upcountry Energy Resilience Project. And our focus is to kind of flip the script on the way these projects are done, which generally it's a developer of some sort coming into our community and saying, we want to do this, yes or no. And I'm really hoping that the work that we're doing alongside other NREL type projects like the Lahaina Energy Project and the CRAP in Molokai, and I think there's another one also in Waianae, can flip the script on that and allow the community to lead these conversations and allow the developers to respond to our community requests.
Aloha, I'm Henry Curtis. Life of the Land was founded in February 1970 by 15 women. I came to the organization in '94, and in March of '96 became involved in energy, approaching it from a transmission line fight, which is very different, understanding how the grid works rather than approaching it from a renewable energy project. Along the way, we introduced the first expert witness on environmental justice in a PUC proceeding back around 2007. We, of course, won the first 2 Hawaii Supreme Court decisions requiring greenhouse gas analyses for all applications at the PUC. In talking about community, this conference is the premier energy conference in the state. How many community people do you see on panels, and how many do you see in the audience, and then say, what is the problem? I think that is the problem. And some people say, well, there's just a few disgruntled people out there. Well, if you look at all of the world's great religions, they all started with one disgruntled person.
I don't know how to segue from that one, Henry, I got to say. But so let me just ask you, you've got a lot of experience. What is your advice to either a new community group or someone that's just getting interested in the energy sector? Do they have to learn all about the PUC to be able to make a difference?
That is very, very hard question because there is so much misinformation in the energy sector. So many values and views and beliefs masquerading as facts, so many facts that are incorrect, so many facts that are dependent on one's viewpoint, that we really need to have a simple way of describing some of these complex issues. And with the wealth of incorrect stuff out there, it's really difficult. But one of the things that I think every community has, one fundamental thing is the community has to be able to say no. Once you go in and say, we're the developer and you have to say yes, how can we bribe you? That's the wrong way to think of things.
Stacey, do you want to give some thoughts?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I guess, let me ask you this. How have you educated yourself about energy? I mean, those of us with the gray and white hair, we have all these years, but how have you gotten yourself up to speed on things?
I mean, I started this off just by showing up and taking up space. Usually I'm giving these talks in reverse. I'm talking to community people and giving people advice on how to engage with developers and industry people. And a lot of it is more just about showing up and listening and being willing to learn. But part of our project has been kind of using me as a test subject because I'm of learning about energy and putting that on the internet and asking people like what their questions are, or if I read a document and I have questions, I kind of like publicly go through this process of asking questions. And I've been really grateful to have a lot of industry people respond to me and like in a very welcoming way. It's not always the case. Some people are very hesitant to engage with me because community scares industry people. But something that I saw repeated often today was the community opposition. Like community is sandwiched between the and opposition. And our project focuses solely on a geographic area, which is Upcountry Maui. And even when we narrow that scope that small, there is no the Upcountry community. Like there's lots of different factions of that. Even we debate constantly, what is Upcountry, where are the lines? And the process of like going through and learning it and being willing to like ask dumb questions and represent the people who maybe don't feel comfortable asking those questions publicly has been a really both interesting and helpful process, also to build trust with the people that I hope to be representing well.
You started this, I think, because you said your bills were rising. From what you've learned so far, do you have any hope that your bill will stop rising?
So actually, I will name drop some people, but Shay Chan Hodges introduced me to Walter Inamoto from Hawaii Energy, and he sat down with me and looked at my bill and looked through my energy usage with me, and like I learned so much in that process just from like an industry person taking the time to like hear my concerns and really hear them, because up until that point the answer that I'd gotten was, well, you're just using more energy. And like it actually was, I had a faulty water heater and it was going off in the middle of the night while I was asleep. But it just took somebody from the industry having the curiosity to really like hear my question and not dismiss it. And it's something that we kind of try to approach the why can't we questions. Like I also heard this a lot today of joking about like people, we just can't underground the power lines. But that's the question that everyone asks of why can't we do it? And it's usually dismissed of like just because we can't. Or just because
you feel you've gotten a straight answer to that question yet?
Not really, and I think like some of the answers I get are not always rooted in reality or lack creativity is what I would say. And the fun thing about engaging this about somebody who knows nothing about energy is like you are willing to be more creative with the possibility of solutions. And so I hope with all the people in the room who are in the industry recognize that sometimes you need a new perspective to see something in a new way, kind of like the way like children think about stuff. Sometimes they can be really insightful, because that's like my full-time job as a mom. I do this for fun because I'm sick.
Sort of like the entire urban area of Honolulu is underground, so we can do it in their neighborhood. We just can't do it in yours.
Yeah, that's basically it. And that conversation in particular at this meeting last year was frustrating to me, because I had just watched over the past few years as they built a whole new sidewalk from Kinkekalike to Foodland, and they were doing all of this water line work underneath. And in my mind of not knowing a ton about it, it's like, it seems like a pretty opportune time to underground the power lines. You guys are already down there, and now there's a sidewalk over it, so it would be much harder to do that now. And I think there's a lot of silos of different, even departments within the county, departments within Hawaiian Electric, departments within Hawaii Energy that don't really know what the other side is doing. Because for an example, I go to these Resilience Hub Network meetings, and some people at the county don't even know that exists. And I talk about Resilience Hubs in my ETIP meetings, and they don't know about the Resilience Hub Hui. And so I'm trying to kind of connect all of these different groups and coalitions and task forces and acronyms so that we can look at the big picture, because that's how community is seeing these projects. We're not looking at just energy, we're looking at water and energy, we're looking at affordable housing and energy, we're looking at how my whole budget for my household is impacted by this one little piece, and each detail impacts that bigger picture.
I'm looking at the clock here, and we're starting to wind down a little bit. So I'd like to ask you each to kind of think about and answer, thinking about this from a community perspective. You've heard people talk about this 100% RPS law. I mean, do you feel like there's a plan? I mean, do you feel like this is actually something that people on the street can understand, and you know that it would make sense to them?
I'll let Henry go first.
At the beginning of the telecom revolution, nobody thought of cell phones as providing mirrors so you can adjust your hair or take pictures or tape record meetings. People had no idea of what was coming, but they knew that an end goal was possible. That same thing is possible in energy, except that unlike telecom, which has single lines and wireless service, you need to occupy a lot of land and you have a lot of competing forces. So it's going to be a lot more complicated, but having an end goal and thinking about different paths forward makes sense.
I think when we talk about 100% renewable energy in community, it sounds like a legislative goal. It sounds like an industry person thing, and it's hard as a community person to think about what that impacts to me. And on that same note, I think anything is possible. Like, we've seen things like AI and the internet explode in just the time that I've been alive. And people who say that certain things aren't possible are usually because they're thinking inside of their box that they've been in for so long. And with when we're thinking about solutions for the future, it's really important to think outside of what maybe is reality in this moment. And to shortly answer your question, yes, I think it's possible, and I think that we need to think bigger. One of the conversations I was having at lunch today was, if you think about when we first started developing energy systems, they were actually more renewable than they are now. So it's almost like a return to the roots with modern technology.
Well, folks, we really appreciate your time and listening to this discussion about community issues. And I'm just going to leave you with a question as we wrap up here. And I've just wondered myself for some time, if we just said the goal of our state energy policy was going to be a $200 a month electric bill for you, and that we're going to do it with as much renewable energy as we can, if that wouldn't be, something people could relate to better. But fortunately, run out of time to actually try to take that on. So anyway, we really appreciate you and your time, and thanks for sharing it with us.